Welcome to the SIGGreen workshop. We're here in Barcelona, Spain, and we are here due to the generous support of our sponsors, the Department of Management of Information Systems from the University of Central Arkansas, School of Library and Information Sciences, North Carolina Central University, Institute of Information Systems, University of Liechtenstein, part of that, and the green theme of the Social Innovation Network, University of Wollongong, Australia. Okay, so we're going to start. We're going to try to keep strictly to 20 minutes, and that will allow us to have everyone present, plus we want to spend some time at the end talking about what we call the SIGGreen statement, which is a statement about how we as academics and citizens of the world should pursue sustainability. Okay, I'm just going to go get my slides up. Okay. Just going to get so this is the title of my. Let me put my timer on so I'm make sure that I don't go over.
Good morning.
Hi.
How are you the School of Business?
Captain Dwyer. I think it's so nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yes, well, Kathy's getting ready. Are you going to register for ESIS as well? Are you going to ESIS?
No.
Okay. All right, so this is the title of my talk. Does Twitter matter in the climate change debate? And I do find all of the data associated with social media and the ability to turn it into graphs extremely compelling. I do feel like we're in the process of some kind of social transformation that is being driven by a number of forces, but certainly technology is one of them. And so there's many maps like this on the internet, but this one in particular is a representation of all of the Twitter messages that started after the 2011 Japanese earthquake. So now we are at 17 minutes past the earthquake, and this color means they originated from Japan. Okay, and then you can see in less than 20 minutes, practically everyone around the world, or every continent, had some kind of Twitter activity within 17 minutes. So it's very powerful, but it's very complex too. Very hard to understand exactly what is going on. And there has been certainly a debate in the United States, I'm not sure if it's extended outside the United States, about whether or not this is an effective tool for political advocacy. And so this is a very interesting article. If you haven't seen it, it's available for free on the web. Malcolm Gladwell is what we would call in the United States a public intellectual. He's sort of someone who will put out there ideas about what's going on, maybe like what you used to call a philosopher in an earlier time. And so his thesis was that the revolution will not be tweeted. And of course, that's a very clever kind of a title, which got him a lot of attention. And he has a very interesting argument that it's not going to be a factor. And then notice the date, October 4th, 2010. Okay, well, we know what happened the following January. Tunisia, Egypt, huge uprising, huge use of social media, and so there was many academics and other speakers as well who said, okay, well, you're wrong, Malcolm Gladwell. This proves that it does matter in advocacy. Okay, so, but I do think that there's a difference between an issue like an uprising and a complex, potentially intractable problem like climate change. You will see the use of very much associated with these viral events, these very things that get a lot of attention, but in terms of actually grappling with the issues of climate change, I'm not sure it is as effective as it might seem. So he makes an argument that because social media depends on weak ties, all right, and if you've read any of the literature on the social network analysis, and this has also been applied to social media, the idea of weak ties is your connections with people online are fairly, not substantial. It's not like your best friends. So you have lots of weak ties, and there certainly is an advantage, because when you have a weak tie with someone, you potentially have access to their network, and then you can potentially pull in knowledge from them. So that's one advantage. It's not like someone that you would call if you had to go to the hospital and you needed help right away. So that's the idea. And what's very interesting about his analysis, this is something I want to pursue, is he talks about the idea of a network structure, a network social structure where there's no hierarchy, versus a hierarchical one. So he's arguing that because these networks do not have a centralized leadership structure, then they are not going to act as a force for social change. That's basically the germ of his argument. Okay, so what I've been thinking about, this is really just very brand new research, and in fact I came up with it like 2 days before the virtual event because I knew I had to present something. But I had been thinking about this. So these are really a work in progress. Okay, so what are the most promising research questions that come from this statement? So first of all, how do these environmental advocacy groups use Twitter? And what I like about this study in this field is that now that there's this enormous riches of data that you can pull in through very many mechanisms, I don't think you even have to do IRB, which is usually a good thing in the U.S. at least. It gets you moving faster. Okay, so this you can all just pull out from looking at the website or using something called an API. The second is, what is the impact, and that's more qualitative. So that would involve getting in touch with these organizations and talking about what their strategy is and seeing what they think is the impact. This would be more what their own perceptions of it are. And this came out of the virtual event. Helen made a very good comment, is that, well, is Twitter just really skewed towards people who are very much pushing towards climate change? Is there another voice active on Twitter? And so I have some thoughts about this. So if I have time, I will get into it. I don't see how much time I have left. I don't know. Okay. All right. So I want to get more into my talk. So I think this is IS for a couple of reasons. The social impact of technology is very much an IS theme. And then I think this is an interesting application of this traditional IS theme of effectiveness. Okay, so even though Twitter was not designed to be an advocacy tool, well, we can actually apply IS methodology to ask this question, is it effective? Okay, so we have anecdotal evidence, but they are very complex patterns that have many strings to them. And then there is a debate going on as to whether or not they're effective or not. Okay, so I just want to show you some of the data. These are all advocacy groups that I just pulled from a paper, and we just collected data about them. In an afternoon, I had a graduate student with me. So these are all. If you're not familiar with Twitter, these are all represent people who subscribe, in a sense, to messages from the organization, and these are the number of tweets or messages that the organization has broadcast. All right, so these are pretty substantial numbers just for a random collection of environmental groups. 120,000. They're by no means the biggest ones out there, but they just happen to be part of a paper. So I just pulled them out and we came up with stuff. So you can see that they're using it, all right? So that kind of leads us to think, well, they must think it's effective for something if they're using it. Okay, so in addition, I haven't been able to tap this yet, but the University of Arizona, Arizona State University, is collecting a data repository of Twitter. And so they have some existing data sets. They also have tools where you can go ahead yourself and collect the data set for your particular interests, and they will store that for you as well. So I've heard about other ones as well, but this is the one that when I was putting these slides together, I was able to find, and then here's the package. So you know, if you're interested in doing social media data collection, this package here could possibly be the tool for you to use. And then, what's the impact? There was a study of the use of Twitter during the Gulf oil spill, but once again, that's a viral event of a different nature of what I'm talking about. And the study did show that the groups were more likely to put stuff on Twitter than any other medium, suggesting that they think it's effective. So it's just one indication that, you know, there is something to be studied there for sure. Exactly how it's going to turn out, it's still up in the air. All right, so I'm collecting. Actually, I would be happy to get suggestions from the group about advocacy organizations that I should follow up with. There's one that's actually kind of associated with my university, so I'm going to use them because hopefully I will be able to find the person who actually is leading the strategy issues and perhaps has thought a bit about its effectiveness as a political advocacy tool. Okay, so that's a case study, and these are just, for example, here is Riverkeeper New York. That's the group that's associated with Pace University. And then here's one from Australia, Climate Action Center. I think that was active during the debate over the tax, but you can see it's pretty small. And then this one, this is something from the UK. But once again, if people have suggestions for me, I would be most appreciative. And okay, so all right, so now this came out of the virtual event. That's a question. Okay, this came out of the virtual event, and so so it's an interesting question about whether or not can you really call it a debate if one group just sends out tweets to its followers and another group sends out tweets to its followers, and there's no intersection of ideas, there's no discussion. So in just looking at it relatively briefly, I did manage to find, I found plenty of, you know, environmental advocacy groups. I didn't find so many organizations that were, let's say, climate change debunkers. Okay, there is one organization called Heartland, this one here, that's gotten a lot of attention in the U.S. because it's funded a lot of misinformation and studies and things like that. So I took a look at this particular group as an example of a debunker, climate change debunker, and I looked through their followers, and I did see one well-known environmentalist. I don't know if you're familiar with Andy Revkin, but he's got a blog called .earth. He was he was a writer on the Times, but he now basically runs a blog for the Times. So he follows them, okay, but probably only just to see what the other side is saying. So this is another interesting tool of social media where you do this social network analysis and you see if there's connections across different groups. So it would be interesting to identify these groups and see if there's any interaction between them versus maybe they're just all talking to each other. So that would be certainly a very interesting outcome. And that's the Heartland site. Okay, and so they have posted some things on Twitter. So, so what I plan to do in pursuing this, I'm very interested in this idea. Come on in. Hello. I'm really very interested in this idea of whether or not we need a hierarchical structure or whether or not we are actually moving into a new type of social organization. And what makes me think that is because of the activities of two groups, the Occupy movement, which you may be familiar with, and then also a group called Anonymous, which is, they were involved with WikiLeaks. They are so anti-hierarchical. I've been to a number of presentations about, actually there's a Biela Coleman who's at NYU. She's done she's an anthropologist, so she has studied Anonymous as an example of a social group. And the ways they make decisions are so interesting. They just will set up a chat site or an IRQ channel, that's basically an anonymous channel. Someone will suggest an action to be taken, usually it's some kind of hacking target, and then all of the participants weigh in, they debate, and whoever happens to be in that IRC room at the time, if they all agree, they make the decision, they go ahead and do it. So it's certainly not hierarchical, and the Occupy movement was very close to my school, the Occupy Wall Street. We could just walk down there and see it. And they also had this General Assembly every day where it was not hierarchical. Like things would come up and they would basically vote on everything. So are we heading into a different type of organization because we have these parallel connections? I mean, it's actually an interesting question, and I do think it will have some fruitful results. So I do believe that Twitter has a place, but I think it's really connected more with publicizing extreme events, not necessarily dialogue. And actually, I plan to look at the way marketers use Twitter, because I think that is very much what these environmental groups do. And marketers basically use Twitter as a big pointer. You know, those people who hold signs and say, go to that restaurant or go to this parking lot. So that's what they use Twitter for. They just want to drive traffic to some other resource. And so there's this two-part strategy of having this one tool connecting to another, and that actually is very parallel to what our findings have been in terms of how do we maintain our organization. We find that there's not just one tool that does it. So with that, I have a few minutes for questions or suggestions about other sites I could take a look at, or other groups. You know, I'm not that familiar with groups in the UK or Australia. Is there another Australian group or New Zealand? Or what's the most prominent environmental group in Australia?
Most of the debate takes place on general sites. So there's a site called Get Up.
Okay.
There's a site called Get Up, which is, but they're general advocacy sites. They'll jump on a number of issues.
Yes,
And there's
right.
a few sites like that, so they're not just focused on climate change. They're usually advocates, and they'll advocate anything that's socially or
Okay.
So I think you get so that they'll whatever's trendy at the time.
Yeah.
They'll be rating.
Okay. Yes.
Your focus was on the networks, where
Yes.
they intersect and things like that. Do you think the text that they send in Twitter, I know it's limited 140 characters, because one of my students is looking at it right now. Can someone mine the text and look at the content of the quick messages?
Yes. You use the API. I mean, me and my students are just starting to look into that, but you can capture the tweets, and then you can subject them to a content analysis. Also, they often have these pattern where they have a hashtag, so you can follow hashtags very easily.
Yeah.
So that's one way to get a collection of tweets from many different parties.
Yeah, the problem with hashtags is that limits the number of characters, right? So 140 becomes 120 and 110 and so on.
I think people have gotten very creative about what they put in their tweets. And actually, if you think about our this is kind of like a metaphor for what sustainability is. We want to live in a place where we're using less resources, so we have something to say in 160 characters. And so that the fact that so much is done with it is actually kind of interesting.
But have you seen a lot of research in this area right now?
It's just starting.
It's just starting? Okay,
Well,
that's good.
yeah, no, of course it's just starting. It wasn't even a factor in the 2008 presidential election.
Yeah.
I mean, it started in 2006. In 2008, Barack Obama did not have a Twitter site. He had everything else.
Yeah.
So now it's really started with the Iran Green Revolution, which I think was 2010. And so now we have 2 years worth of use. So of course it's new. And so
Eddie's got a lot.
Okay.
And it's interesting whether people actually use just Twitter or they use one of the tools to manage your Twitter feed. So
yes, that's
I know
right.
people have several sort of separate
That's
tweets,
true.
Following different sort of hashtags or different people in different.
Yeah, no, and
different
there's
windows.
things you can automate. Yeah, I haven't looked into that at all. So, but anyway, I'm out of time. So thank you very much, and
Thank you
all.